so, and the main reason I'm covering these is because of my grandfather, Carl Hornby. Some of you folks are familiar with his maps. He made all kinds of maps. You can get in the park library. A lot of the hikers use those to go back to the different areas, Greenbrier, Sugarland, Elkmont, Tremont. So this is really his research. When he retired, he did his genealogy research, and along with my uncle Jack. And I was kind of entrusted with all of their research and kind of commissioned at my uncle's death. He didn't make a book about all of this and keep it alive with their family. So that's why I made the books that I did. And this is really just a result of the books, and I'd like to share it with you, hoping it will be of interest. So I'd like to tell it in a story form, because if it's just a genealogy of who came from who, you guys would be rolling back your eyeballs and getting bored with it. So I would like to make it a little bit more meaningful than that. And so to start out with, we've got areas in the Smokies, and I don't know how well you can see these, but I'm going to probably have to sit down and do this presentation if you guys are all right with that, because I got to work with my mouse. But in the Smoky Mountains, there's all kinds of communities that developed over the years. You've got the North Carolina side, you've got the Tennessee side. So I'll be focusing on the Tennessee side, the areas east and west of Gap. Back to the communities. This is a little bit better map. I'll try to stay close to this. Don't you get this out? There we go. Gatlinburg, most people know about. All the tourists have been there. It's been around for years. Its original name was White Oak Flats. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then Greenbrier's to the east of it. If you go 321 towards Cosby, that's Gatlinburg. And then the Sugarland Valley is following the Pigeon River back up 441 through the park and Newfound Gap, that area, going into North Carolina. That's the Sugarland Valley. And then I'll start out, believe it or not, in Elkmont. And it's a community that everybody pretty much knows, and it's because of the homes that are still left up there that they kept in the Appalachian Club that are still there today. But that's actually not Elkmont, that's Daisy Town. It was above Elkmont. Elkmont is the campground. And that is where my grandparents lived. This is my grandfather and grandmother. This is Carl and Hornby, the one that made all the little maps that people have. Oak Park. I've never heard of anybody else named Iowa, but that's my grandmother. And this is my mother. She was married Helen Hornby, the baby below. I keep trying to get my mouse pointed. And then her brothers, Jack was here with my granddad, hiking with Greenbrier. They researched, did all of our family history. And then she had two other brothers, JC and Hayes. And this is them in Elkmont when they were dating. And of course, they had little chaperones in my grandpa's car with them. My grandmother's brothers were there with them. My grandmother, her dad was William Parton, and he got a job with the railroad as a blacksmith. He would repair tools up in the logging camps like Rough Creek Fish Camp. And he would also do the mules that they would use to drag the logs down so the trains could load them up and haul the lumber and logs out. And their home, this is their home. I'd love to have that red racer play. This is their home. And it was right across from the depot, the railroad depot, that would take you over to the Appalachian Club. There used to be a boardwalk that went all the way across to the Appalachian Club. And if you go up above the campgrounds where the homes are, the Appalachian Club sits at the end. This is before you start that loop around. Okay, it's just straight up the river. This is actually the Elkmont campground today. This is where my grandfather lived with his parents. It was a railroad town. A lot of people debate, where did the name Elkmont come from? There's no elk up there. Well, the Elks Club were good friends of Colonel Townsend. They came over and talked him into selling them some property for their hunting cabins, and he had already logged that area out, so he sold them property, and they named it Elkmont because of the Elks Club. A lot of other stories vary from that, but that's the one my granddad told me. As you follow down the railroad tracks, this machine shop is where my grandfather, Carl Hornby, worked. He started there when he was 15 years old. And he worked there until he was 22. And then you can see the schoolhouse in the background. Well, I think it's church. I think of that. Robert Hornby and Emma Whaley, and then William Parton and Lavisha Parton. Well, this couple is my grandmother's parents. This couple is my grandfather's parents. My grandparents' mothers were first cousins. So their dads were brothers, Joel Whaley, Pinky Whaley. So family history-wise, in my bloodstream, I've got Brackens, Cole, Parton, Whaley, Oynby, Ogle, all of that is who I come from, okay? As a matter of fact, if you look at my hairline, you see the similarities. me and Pinky have a lot in common, okay? They say it comes through your mother, right? And it does. And so this is Julia Bracken. Her father was the first of the Brackens to come into the Smokies. The family oral history is he brought his family in there to try to get away from the Civil War. They were trying to hide out in the mountains and avoid the Civil War that was brewing in the 1860s. And then this is Peggy Husky, and the Huskies came in with the Ogles, the first settlers in Gatlinburg. So she's a descendant of them. Most people know this man as Bullhead Whaley. His original name was John Henry Whaley. He's a son of the original William M. Whaley that came in, one of many sons that he had that came in to the Smokies. And of course, this is his two sons, Pinky and Joel. So if you look at my grandparents, their mothers being first cousins made them second cousins, right? Their granddads were brothers, so they had the same great-grandfather. Most people's family tree forks, mine is more like a stick. That explains a lot, my sister. If we switch off, I'm going to kind of switch now, just background on my grandparents, okay? I'm going to move to the community of Gatlinburg. You got it underlined here. We all know where it is. It really sits outside the park, but it's sort of a gateway into the park. And these are not photos. People used to say, well, those can't be William Ogle and Martha Jane Husky, because they didn't have photography back then. Photography didn't come around 1830. Well, folks, these are pictures of portraits. These are portraits of those folks. They're not photos, okay? They look lifelike, but they're actually portraits. And this is Isaac Husky. He's kind of the patriarch of most of the Huskies. He was Martha Jane's nephew, and Martha Jane's brother, Peter Husky, was his dad that came into the Smokies with her. William Ogle had been, a lot of the family tradition says he was a hunter and trapper. He'd been over in the Tennessee side of the Smokies. Been gone for quite a while. Found a spot that he wanted to move his family to, so he cut the timber, he hewed the logs, but he didn't build the cabin. He went back to Edgeville, South Carolina to get his family, and there was I think it was a typhoid fever going around at that time, and he died with the fever. He didn't get to come back. So Martha Jane, knowing the story, knowing his dream, she got with her brother Peter, and she also had a married daughter named Rebecca. Her husband was James McCarter, and so they came over with Martha Jane and her sons, Thomas J. Ogle and Hercules, and some of those. And then Mary Ann was still single and footloose and fancy free, but came over as well. And with all of those men folk helping them out, they found a spot, built a cabin, and it still sits in Gatlinburg today. You can see it if you're going out to where the Anarchista parking lot and going towards 321, it sits right in that area. These two ladies eventually married brothers, these sisters. James McCarter died when he was 33. And he and Rebecca settled Cartertown. If y'all know much about the Gatlinburg area, they settled Cartertown, so the McCarters settled. And Middleton Whaley married the widow, Rebecca Ogle, Rebecca McCarter. And then later on, Mary Ann married William Whaley. I come from the William Whaley. So Middleton and Rebecca only had one son. His name was Aaron Whaley. And so the old saying used to be, if you were a Whaley in Greenbrier, they said, well, did you come from the new Whaley or the old Whaley? And so the old Whaley was William M. He was the uncle. The new Whaley was Aaron, the nephew. I came from William M. But here's the cabin that was assembled. I'll touch a little bit on the Reagans. I don't have any relatives in the Reagan family, but they were early settlers in the White Oak Flats area. Timothy came in with his four brothers, and really more of the Sevierville area, Sevierville Pigeon Forge area. He was a blacksmith. He built the first, supposedly, from what I've heard oral history, the first jail cells in Sevierville, the bars and the shackles. And him and his four brothers served in the Revolutionary War. and probably with John Severe, my bigger title, brought them into that area. His son, Richard, settled over in Emmert's Cove first on the Little Pigeon River. That was the middle prong of the Little Pigeon River. And Peter Husky, the brother of Martha Jane, had settled over there as well, and they had land grants. Later on, Peter decided to go west, so he went out west, I think, to Missouri. And Richard decided to move, him and Isaac Husky, that was Peter's son, both of them decided to move back to White Oak Flats. And they sold their land to a man named Frederick Emmert, so it became Emmert's Cove in that area. Frederick Emmert was also a Revolutionary War soldier. But Daniel W. Reagan, got a grave marker for him. When Timothy got old, he came back to live with his son Richard in the Gatlinburg area. They lived sort of the Mill Creek area, but on the river the Blue Pigeon that runs through Gatlinburg, kind of the Mill Creek area there. And Daniel owned a lot of land above his dead Richard. And when Timothy died, they had a little home plot that they buried Timothy on. And then Richard got killed in an accident. A limb fell out of a tree, hit him in the head, crushed his skull, and killed him. That's kind of more than I said. But Daniel buried him, on his dad. And later on, he inherited Richard's land. And so on Richard's little home place, he donated that land for the White Oak Flat Cemetery, which is in the village today. If you go to the little brick sidewalks in the village in Gatlinburg up on the hill, you'll find the White Oak Flat Cemetery. All these people are buried up there. Now, I've got Richard Reason Reagan here because he was deputy sheriff, county sheriff, but he became the first postmaster of Gatlinburg. We're going to tie into him a little later on, okay? White Oak Flats Cemetery, a picture of it, you can hike back in there today. Isaac Husky's buried there, Martha Jane Oldham was buried there, Thomas, their son, is buried there, and so was Timothy Reagan. He was the first grave marker in there. A lot of people debate about where that is exactly. They've got the monument there, but they don't really know where his grave is. They think it was just you go in the gate to the right in the corner, but no one knows for sure. And then a descendant of the elders, Thomas, who was Martha Jane's son, and then his son Harkless T. This is the grandson of Thomas. This is Noah Ogle. He started the first Ogle store in White Oak Flats. And then across, this is Baskins Creek, across the little, they had a footbridge, and then the border of the river. They had a little building they built. It was kind of a community place for the school, first school together in, and the church together in at first. And later on, the church grew, they built a new schoolhouse, and then the next generation of Ogle came along. Ephraim E. Ogle had the store next. And the store actually went through 4 generations of Ogles. Charles was the son of Ephraim, and then his son, Charles Jr., all 4 generations had the Ogle store. And of course, Ephraim this is his marriage day photo. I cropped his wife out. I probably shouldn't have done it. I've got him there so you can see what he looked like. And nothing personal against his wife. I just a picture. And then this is his house on the Little Pigeon River. And here's an old photo I found of Gatlinburg. The cemetery sits up here on the hill. The church right here, Baskins Creek, is running down in the Ogle store. And then the Little Pigeon River running around. The neat road runs a little bit higher up, away from the river. But this is the old route to 321 taking you to Cosby. If you continue down, you go to Parkway down to the Pigeon Forge. That's sort of the route you're taking there. Richard Reagan, not to be outdone, Reagan's by the Ogles. They built a house on the river as well. This is actually Charles Reagan's home, not Richard. And he was a descendant of the Reagans, obviously. I've got a picture of Mac McCarter. I didn't want to leave the McCarters out. Mac, he was famous for weaving baskets, making brooms. He had a little shop in Gatlinburg on the Parkway. Parkway being, those of you that are not familiar with Gatlinburg, as you're heading out of Gatlinburg down to Pigeon Forge, that's the Parkway going down through there. And Mac had a little shop down there. And a gentleman by the name of Andy Huff came into Gatlinburg in 1897, and a lot of logging was going on up in the mountains, and he had a sawmill. He had actually several sawmills. So he built a little hotel to house his lumber workers. And that little hotel grew up into about 225 rooms, and when it became a tourist area, it became the Mountain View Hotel. That hotel's torn down now, but my wife and I actually got to stay in it. It was real creaky. All the rooms, the floor slanted to the outside of the building. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed staying there. This is Gatlinburg before the tourists. The old dirt road, the church, looking back towards the mountains. And then by 1940s, it was already a tourist town. Okay, so they were off and running. So now, I mentioned earlier, here's Gatlinburg, I mentioned Cartertown, just to get some geographic location. Dudley Creek was where my Ormby kin, Aaron Ormby, settled on Dudley Creek, but a lot of his other Ormby relatives settled on up into the Greenbrier area. And then this is the Emmert's Cove I mentioned earlier, where some of the first settlers came in, and Frederick Emmert settled there last, bought the land from Peter Husky and so forth. The Pittman Center is probably what they call it today. So let's look a little bit about the Greenbrier. This is where my grandfather was born, Carl Ormby, and he grew up there. This is his parents, once again, who met him earlier, Robert and Emma. Aaron Ormby is who my grandfather descended from. His dad, John Ormby Jr., was the first Ormby to come into the Smokies, and specifically in the Greenbrier. There's another John Ormby. He's the nephew of John Jr. John Jr.'s brother James never came into the Smokies, but his nephew, his son, John Jr. John did. He's going to keep John straight here. But John came in about 10 years afterwards, and a lot of people ask about Granny Coon, right? So I'm not related to that branch of the Ormbys, but they did come in and settle in the Greenbrier later on. So I'm through John Jr. with Aaron. The reason Aaron's dressed like this, looking like a pilgrim, he was the justice of the peace of that district. That's why they're out here. This is made from an old tin type photo, if y'all remember the old tin types. This is John Bullhead Whaley. His name is John Henry Whaley. He was a brother-in-law to Aaron. He married his sister, Mourning Ormby, and that's like a mourning dove, M-O-U-R-N, Mourning Ormby. And then Aaron Whaley was the first cousin to John, we mentioned earlier. He's the son of Middleton Whaley and Rebecca Ogle. He's the only son they had. Martha Jane Ogle, she was a Husky, and her daughter, Mary Ann, married William Whaley. So this is kind of a rare photo. It's got the surviving sons of William and Whaley. I'm descended through Bullhead, John Henry. This is Perry. His name was Perry Commodore. I'm not sure why he came up with the name of Commodore. He had a brother named Preston. His name was Colonel. A lot of people call him Colonel Preston. It's actually Preston Colonel. He's not pictured here. He died in 1897. This picture was made, I think around 1908. And then you had this is Isaac, and then you had Ira. Ira died in the fall after this picture was made. Isaac was actually a twin to Jane, is one of the daughters of William. And then you had the Reverend George Bradford Whaley, and then we had Elijah, who was the youngest of the group. Can y'all still hear me okay over there? Just check it okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Bullhead. Where did that name come from?
I'm going to cover it.
Oh, okay.
It's like which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So Martha Jane, these are her grandsons. And her daughter's children. Poor old Mary Ann, she had 14 kids. This is just a few of the survivors here, okay? The oldest two sons didn't stay in Sevier County. They actually moved out. The oldest son was Alexander, named after his granddad. The next one was William Jr. And both of them left. They didn't settle in the Sevier County. So John Bullhead was sort of the third son. He was the oldest of the group that stayed here. And Aaron, we'll tie Aaron in a little bit. Aaron's family, he's, again, Middleton's only son. These are some of his sons with his mama. Aaron married an Ormby. Now, this is Granny Coon's daughter. Okay, this is Sarah Ormby. And their son, Aaron and Sarah's son, he went by John Dudley Whaley. And he married Aaron Ormby's daughter, Nancy. So we got the Ormbys and the Whaleys marrying early on here. And then I thought this was interesting. Bullhead got a land grant for 300 acres, but it's signed with James K. Polk. He was the governor of Tennessee at the time. And this is in the upper part of Greenbrier. Greenbrier is broken down into communities, but up in the upper part at the foot of Porter's Mountain, it's named all the way up Porter's Creek, Porter's Mountain. And he had the upper area. And then Aaron Ormby's brothers, Amos, and they had a little brother named John Humphrey, but everyone just called him Humpy John Ormby. To differentiate him from the other Ormbys, right? John, and he on the lower end. And so Humpy John had 500 acres down below, and Bullhead had the 300 acres above. Well, Amos decided he would go try his luck out west. So he left, sold his 200 acres to Bullhead. So now Bullhead's got 500 acres on the upper part of Porter's Creek. Humpy John's got 500 acres below. They both built their cabins about 20 years before the Civil War. John Whaley, Humpy John Hornby. And about 15 years after that, give or take, Bullhead's cabin burns. And he's got another brother-in-law named Harkless T. Oberlin living in the Gatlinburg area, and Harkless T's married to Margaret Hornby. She's a sister to John Whaley's wife, Morty. And so Harkless says, why don't you just come over here? You burned out over there, sell that land and come over. So he comes over into the upper part of Gatlinburg, you know, the Roaring Fork Trail, and he settles at the foot of Bullhead Mountain, okay? And buys land from Harkless T's brother-in-law. He sells out to Humpy John, so now Humpy John's got the whole 1,000 acres, all right? Well, after Humpy John dies, his children inherit the land, and they really didn't settle up in there. They leased it out to, I think, Armstrong Lumber Company, and they logged it for a while, but I'll continue that story in a moment. But here's my two great-grandfathers, or great-great-grandfathers. These are children. I don't have photos of all of John Whaley's children, but this is most of his children that I have pictures of. This one, Steve, his youngest, is actually the man who started or built the Riverside Hotel. Those of you that remember, it got burned during the fire that swept through Gatlinburg, but he built the Riverside Hotel. And then Lydia Whaley, we've had a talk on Lydia Whaley. Well, she was the daughter-in-law of John Whaley, okay? She was married to John Bradson Whaley, his older son. During the Civil War, Joel, the little brother, he kind of got captured by some Confederate renegades that they would need to build up the Confederate army, right? They were losing men, and they just wanted to have a presence of, you know, a lot of men in the army. So they were taking young farm boys and just putting them out there in the army so it looked like you had a lot of guys in the field. And they took a few of the farm boys here, and John Bradson, he was not necessarily in the Civil War, quote, as a soldier, but he was like the home guard, okay? And kind of defending the area, and he was trying to rescue his little brother, and he got killed in that event. So that left poor Lydia Whaley a widow, and she stayed a widow the rest of her life. She supported herself making quilts, blankets. She made her own thread. You can see her spinning. She made brooms and baskets, but she supported herself and had a shop in Gatlinburg, or her home in Gatlinburg. Now, Aaron Hornby, Bullhead Whaley, they're brothers-in-law, right? Aaron's son is Joel, Bullhead's son Pinckney. And these are my grandfather's grandparents, Robert, Columbus, and Emma. So this is how they descended down. Well, here are these descendants of Humpy John Whaley. He's passed, got the 1,000 acres. Armstrong Lumber's finished getting the timber they wanted out of there. It's just laid there. And back taxes of $3.75 was owed on this land. Aaron, being a justice of the peace, he's going through the old records there at the courthouse. He sees this land with back taxes owed on it, so he pays the taxes to get a lien on the property. And then he goes and talks to his little brother's descendants, who are the first cousin of Joel. Says, what are y'all going to do with that land? Well, I don't know. Well, would you sell it? Sure. So they sold it for $1 an acre, 1,000 acres. So they split it between Joel Hornby and Pinckney Whaley. And they split the 500 acres, the 1,000 into two 500-acre tracts. Joel got the lower half that Humpy John lived on, his uncle. And Pinckney got the upper half where his dad used to live, where Pinckney was born, and that cabin burned. So Pinckney built his cabin right back on the same site that, Bullhead Whaley's cabin was on. Many of you folks have hiked back there today. People will call it the Messer place because they bought it from Pinckney, or the hiker's cabin, as you would know it. It's an interesting story, though. Joel moved into Humpy John's old cabin that was still there, and then he eventually built him a house. If you've ever hiked up in Greenbrier, Porter's Creek, you'll see the rock steps in the bank. That's taking you to Joel's place, and then one of the cemeteries above it. This was the cantilever barn that Pinckney had built. Last I saw this, a tree fell through it, or a storm blew the roof off. I'm not sure, but the roof's gone. I'm hoping they're going to restore it. And in Pinckney's cabin that he sold to John Messer, it only had this chimney was on the outside, but the Hikers Club back in the 40s got permission from the park, and they went up to, this is Pinckney's daughters, this is Phoebe, and she lived up in the area called the Indian Nation, And they tore Phoebe's cabin down, the Hikers Club, then and rebuilt it and joined it to Pinky's cabin, made the present one that you see today. And then Leander, who's the son of Pinky, and here's Julia Bradford again. Leander taught school in Greenbrier, and then he actually ran a store there for a little while with Davis Martin. So here's the Plemons Cemetery. It's got some old cemetery graves in there. A lot of people like to hike back to it. William Whaley's buried there, his wife, Mary Ann Ogle, and then John Boynbee Jr., that was my ancestor, all buried there. Many, many more graves there. It's a real pretty old cemetery. One thing that Whaley's brought from Greenbrier into the mountains is the old harp singing style. Now this is singing church music, gospel music, and they would sing in the churches, and it was singing by parts. If you've ever listened to quartets with a soprano, an alto, a bass, and a tenor, well, they used something called shape note music, because a lot of them couldn't read music, and you followed the shape of your note to sing your part. And they would sing in harmony, and they would sing in rounds. It's really pretty to see. If you happen to drift back up to the Whaley reunion that they still have up in Greenbrier, I think they still sing the shape note music for years. It's worth listening to. I think you can even buy, I think there's copies of it out there on CD of old harp singing. It's an unusual type of singing. These are Whaley's in here, Calvin, and there's a Pinky in the front, back here's Vanderbilt, so you got different Whaley's in the group. And then Calvin, he was one of the pastors up in Friendship Church in Greenbrier, and a bunch of the Boynbee clan. This is Beecher Oynbee, if anybody knew Beecher, and John Oynbee. There's several Oynbees and Whaleys, and I think their names are mentioned here. There's a Russell. But this is the front of Friendship Church. This store was built by my grandfather's dad. This is Robert Columbus, and his brother-in-law, Davis Martin. This had the first post office in Greenbrier, and Davis Martin was the mail carrier. Picture of him on horseback carrying mail up in the Greenbrier area. This set in parallel with Porter's Creek. So here's the store again. The church set up on a hill above the store. This was the Friendship Baptist Church. And my grandfather, this is the map I referred to earlier that he made. A lot of the hikers use this map today. Here's Greenbrier in 1908. Now looking from the church across the store top here, back to the schoolhouse. This is where my granddad went to school. It was actually the third schoolhouse built in the area. The first school was actually Elijah Whaley, the youngest son of William. They kept William's cabin, and they said it was built of a better sort. They hated to tear it down, and so they used it for the first schoolhouse. And then later on, they built a school kind of back, a little bit behind this, we think. I'm not positive. I think it's set kind of to the right and back of this schoolhouse. Well, Kimsey Whaley, another one of the Whaleys, when they built the new school after this, Kimsey Whaley bought this, and he built the LeConte Hotel, or the Hotel LeConte as it was called. And this used to be the way a lot of tourists would come in from Sevierville, stay at the LeConte Hotel, and they would go to Mount LeConte this way, before the way we go now. This used to be the way they would go on Porter's Creek and the backside of LeConte. The reason I cropped these together, if you notice, there's a little footbridge in this photo you're going to cross. And there's actually a wooden bridge you can drive a wagon and a car across. There's a little automobile sitting there, the LeConte Hotel. Kimsey just remodeled this, made a hotel out of it, and then added an annex later. But you can see, this is Joe Whaley's store, his little hen house, his grist mill. Joe Whaley was that Reverend George Bradford Whaley's son. And you can still see the top of that store through the trees. You can possibly make out the rooftop of that. But today, the dotted lines is where the road you would drive on today. They tore this old bridge down. This store's gone as well. But you drive right through the heart of the old hotel. You're driving, it's set literally in the middle of the road. And so, the Plemons Cemetery, most people will park a little parking place and hike back to the Plemons Cemetery. Well, this schoolhouse was built late 1924. Children attended it 25, 26, and then it burned down. You can still see these columns today, but they couldn't move back to the old schoolhouse because it had become a hotel, so they had to kind of farm all the kids out into the different churches in the area. The LeConte Hotel, it's a little car, they would use that car to, again, haul the tourists from Sevierville area up into the hotel to stay. And you could stay there for $1.75 a night. What if we could negotiate with Rams? Anyway, and you could eat at the annex building, had a little dining room and a kitchen in there, and you could actually get a meal for a whole dime, believe it or not. For 10 cents you could get a meal. I think they tore this down when the park took over in like 1936 era, somewhere along in there, but it stayed for a good 10 years more. Now let's move over into the Sugarlands area. I found this little map. I thought it was a pretty drawing. Coming up from Gatlinburg, following the Little Pigeon River. This is the west prong of the Little Pigeon River. You're going up into Newfound Gap area, up into the Chimneys, and then Fighting Creek Gap. Fighting Creek comes down and flows into it. Fighting Creek, you know, is Laurel Falls. Most people like to go to Laurel Falls to hike. It's just blowing down the mountain from there. The old, I think it was Joel Carr's farm. It's where the Sugarlands Visitor Center sits now. Slim line of the valley, which get in here into the kind of bigger Sugarland Valley area. We'll look into that in a moment. And then there's a little cubby hole, if I can find it, I think right here where my grandmother was born on Sugarland Branch. So let's look at this. Let's go up really high up into the chimneys of the Sugarlands. And John Pinckney Cole was the first Cole to come into the mountains. And his son, Bill, and his daughter, Mary, are pictured here. And then Davis Bracken, his dad, Andrew Jackson Bracken, was the first Bracken to come in. And I don't know if I've said this already, but Andrew Jackson Bracken, the reason it was said he came in was to avoid the Civil War. I think I mentioned that earlier. Kind of keep his family away from that. But Vance Newman was the first Newman to come into the area. And Mary Cole became his second wife after his first wife died. He is buried in a cemetery called the Cole Newman Cemetery up in the Sugarlands. Picture of his old cabin. And then in the I call this the Sugarland Valley because you can kind of still hike the distance, the biggest opening. The river ran where I got the blue line and this tree line. That's the Little Pigeon River running through there. And so the valley was on each side of the river, east and west. And Burton Noble had a farm here. Here's a picture, the only picture I could find of Burton. It's not very good. But he married Vance Newman's daughter, Josephine. So that was Burton's wife. And I'll have a blow-up picture of this one later, but everyone's heard of it. I say everyone. There's a lot of people like to hike back to this place called the Skyuka Inn. What Skyuka stood for, I have no idea, but the Skyuka Inn, it was built by Sam Husky. And when we blow this picture up, I'll be able to show you the store that's set by it. This crop of trees here, actually apple trees. It's an apple orchard in a cornfield. We'll kind of look a little bit different look here. This is the Newman Cole Cemetery. There's actually a Confederate soldier and a Union soldier, both buried in the same graveyard there. Burton Noble, who had the farm, his grandson, Ernest Noble, opened the store. This is the front of the store with some of the community folks taking the photo. 441 highways up here. You can hike down this old roadbed trail. The cemetery set there. Work your way around the trail. Skyuka Inn sits back here. And then there was an old bridge across the river that would take you. They call that the Dykish Road. The locals called it the old 28 Road because it was built in 1928. Ernest Ogle was married to someone you may know, Lucinda Ogle. And Lucinda is the daughter of the Roman man of the Smokies, Wiley Ogle. Now, here's a picture of Sam Husky. There's his daughter's store that she built next to the Skyuka Inn. All that's left is the fireplace. You can hike back and find that today. And then we mentioned the Coles. Here's Alex Cole. His old cabin is on the Roaring Fork Trail. This is his home back before they moved the cabin. See, I guess that's an A model, T model Ford. I'm not sure what that is. But his son Jess Cole lived here, so the road went right between the store and Jess Cole and across the bridge. The store was run by Hazel and Jim Reagan. Hazel was Sam Husky's daughter. I guess that's why she got so close to the Skyuka Inn. Andrew Jackson Bracken, first Bracken into the area, came in. This is his wife, Damaris. We always wondered what was she so mad about in that photo. Most people, I think, they had to just wait so long for the camera, to snap the shot. By the time it snapped the picture, your smile was gone a long time ago. But again, Julie Bracken and one of my ancestors, and then Davis Bracken were their children. They had many others. This is just, I won't have photos of. Here's Davis with his family. He married a Cole, Josephine Cole. And then this is Pinky and Julie again. Both of them, my grandfather's parents. If we look at, this is not a good photo, but it's the best thing I've got to show. But you're coming up the Sugarland Valley, coming up, and I know y'all probably can't see this, but there's a bridge where the bridge goes across at the Chimneys, and crosses the river there, and the Chimneys campground, picnic area up in here. Then the road just sort of winds and comes up. Well, this upper part of the Chimneys picnic area is where the Cole family lived. And then down in this area, kind of in this valley, where the Brackens lived. And Bill Cole, Mary Cole being children of the first Cole to come into the area. Bill Cole's son was Steve. We're going to talk a little bit more about Steve later, and we've already seen Alex, who was living down in Sugarland Valley. Well, they called the area where they farmed up here the Goober Farm. And y'all remember the old song, Eating Goober Peas? Peanuts, right? Well, they raised peanuts up there. They had a peanut farm. So they called it the Goober Farm. You can see a little bit of the chimney in the background of the Chimney Mountains. Over here you can see the chimney's better, but there's their barn. There's Bill Cole's old house. And here he and his brother Joseph are sitting on the front porch. But they lived in the upper part of the Chimneys. Later on, Steve Cole moves down. He marries, I guess you pronounce that Sharitza, or she went by Kay Reagan. She was, remember our Richard Reagan, that was the first postmaster in Gatlinburg. That was his daughter. So Steve Cole marries Kay, and they buy Richard Reason's old house down in the Sugarlands. It's on the east side of the river, and it's not too awful far from the Sugarlands Visitor Center. It's probably, maybe a mile up. I don't know if it's that far. But that's the tie-in with the Coles and the Reagans.
Are those bee gums?
Yes, thank you. I meant to say that. That was what Steve Cole did. He was famous for raising honey and bees. Yeah. My Hornby name, as I researched it, people pronounce, all the old folks would call them Hornsbees. They put an S on it. It was really just Hornby, and they would spell it O-W-E-N-B-Y, O-W-B-E-E, and all kinds of different ways. My granddad just spelled it O-W-N-B-Y, like Hornby or by. And it's derived from, remember, Smiths, because you're probably a blacksmith, or if you're a cooper, you make buckets. Well, if you were a beekeeper, you own bees, right? So they were beekeepers. All the homies of the Smokies owned bees, so homies. Now, here we're going to follow the river up. Yeah, we kind of kept it simple on the go, right? You know, so it's complicated. But this is that big steep curve I showed you the photo of. This is the Sugarland Valley. And as you come back up to the main road, this being in blue is the old Dykish Road, and here's the main road coming up today. But you can hit Husky Gap Trail, and if you know where to find the old sled road, you can come back in here to the Sugarland Branch area, a little valley back in there. That's where my grandmother was born. Joel Whaley actually was settled up in there. Before Joel came up in that area, the Huskies, as far as I can find out, were in there earlier. So I've got a picture of Peggy Husky's dad. This was James Wesley Husky. He settled all over the place in the mountains. He lived in Sugarland Branch. He lived over in the River Valley. He lived on Meggs Mountain. And he married an Ogle. Hannah Ogle was his wife. So here's Joel Whaley, his father, Bullhead. I hadn't got your answer yet, but I'm going to get there on Bullhead Mountain. I'm getting there. And then Peggy Husky. My great-grandfather, my grandmother's dad, William Parton. The Partons came in, Old Ben as they called him. He was a tenant farmer working for Frederick Emmert back over in Emmert's Cove. And then his son, Benjamin Chris, he started Parton Town that's up in the lower part of Greenberg Cove, below where the river and Porter's Creek comes together. Benjamin Chris had a descendant that's kind of famous in this area. I may have heard of her. I won't mention her name because I don't know if I'm allowed to. But anyway, we have to go back to Civil War brothers for me to tie into her. My partner relative that's brother to Benjamin Chris was Elijah Wilbur Parton. He died in the Andersonville prison, the prison camp there. It didn't look like a concentration camp. I mean, he got the cholera, a lot of bad sanitary conditions, and he died there and left. His wife was William Whaley's daughter, and he left her a widow. So Caroline's his daughter. And so since Martha Whaley was her mother, and we had Joe Whaley's dad, John Bullhead, these guys were brothers and sisters. So Joel was Caroline Parkin's first cousin. Well, William's getting to be a 15-year-old young lad, and he's wanting to cut loose and get free from mom and dad. So she says, well, let me take you over to my cousin Joel. He's a pretty prosperous man up there in the Sugar Lands, and he's got a big, sawmill and upper outfit. He's kind of the justice of the peace up in there, and knows a lot of folks. Everybody looks up to him. So why don't you just go over to his farm with him? So he goes to work for his mother's first cousin Joel. Takes up with his oldest daughter, Elisha, and they get married. And the story is that William would haul Joe used to gather all the produce for the folks who had raised their crops, their farms, and he'd haul them in these big wagons and take them down to Sevierville in the country square on the weekends. They would have a sale of the produce down there. So Elisha decided she wants to take a ride in with him and keep him company one time. They get very well acquainted on that wagon ride, so they started dating and eventually married. This is Joel and Peggy with their family, William and Elisha, and she's got her oldest son Fred in her lap, and this is Marshall Whaley, their son. They actually kept their oldest son's little boy for a while while the oldest dad was away. I think he's in the military, where he's at. But anyway, this is Horace, and Nan is the first cousin to William. But this was Joel Whaley's barn, and it was famous. They called it the turnaround barn. You could pull a wagon at the wheel and pull the wagon into the barn loft and unload the hay, which I thought was pretty good. A lot of farmers, I'm sure, did that area. But Will and Elisha had 9 children while they were living in this little one-room cabin. Can you imagine 9 kids in that little cabin? And my grandmother was right beside her mom here, but these were the first 9 children. The little baby in Elisha's lap, he only lived to be 1 year old. He died on his first birthday. And they were living in Townsend at the time. And this is Joe Whaley's front porch. Later on, some of his surviving brothers came and had a picture made together. There's Pinckney later on in life. And this is Harkless, and this is Columbus. And there's Peggy sitting behind. This gentleman here was always a mystery to someone identified him. He's Harrison Ellison. He has nothing to do with the family. He was just a visitor. Watch me in 5 minutes. I got to hurry through this. So this is Fred. This is Hugh, the sons. The Huskies, they really settled a lot in Sugar Lands Valley, and even over in the upper part of Elmont, known as the Little River Valley. Of course, descendants of old Isaac here, we've seen earlier. John Wesley, as we know. And this is John Wesley, 3 of his children, not all of them, but they have a tie with Martha James. Well, she was an aunt to these guys. And so Aaron Husky, and then Isaac Bradley Husky, to differentiate him from old Isaac, and then there's Peggy. Their families, these were all neighbors up in the area. The Huskies were all neighbors. Some significance about Aaron Husky, those of you who are in the Smoky Mountain Historical Society, y'all know old Charles Husky, right? Well, Charles Husky's Aaron's son, and he was a real good friend of my granddad's. They were historians together. And Sam McCarter was another. They all did their research together and were very good friends. And here they are at my uncle and my granddad at Charles Husky's home. Charles Husky had a wonderful library at his house, full of old photos and old history. You can get his memoirs if you check with Michael a day in the Park Library. They're wonderful, wonderful reads if you can get Charles Husky's memoirs. This is a track log in blue. It's taking it up into the Sugar Land Valley area and then the Sugar Land branch area over here in the valley. But here I'm going to get to your Bullhead Mountain question. Okay, who came first? Was the mountain named after Bullhead Whaley, or was Bullhead Whaley named after the mountain? Well, I've got a little artwork here that shows Mount LeConte. The old timers thought it looked like the back of a bull, and the Bullhead Mountain looked like the head of the bull. So it was known as Bullhead Mountain because it looked like a bull and a bull head. When John Whaley moved over there, he was only known as John Henry until he moved to the foot of Bullhead Mountain. So, hey, we got to differentiate you from the other John Whaleys. You're going to be Bullhead, John. There's your answer, okay? You're welcome. So let's get back just a minute. We're going to go back and talk about Alex Cole here just for a moment. I'll end up a slideshow here, and then William and Elisha, here they are. Well, Fred, their oldest, and their third son, Hubert, married sisters. So Alex Cole's daughter, Cora, married Fred. Alex Cole's other daughter, Maggie, or Mag Cole, married Hugh. Hugh and Maggie had a daughter named Pauline and a son named Rex. Rex ran the Omar's Cafe, if y'all remember way back in the 60s, Omar's restaurant. He started out working the lunch counter in the old Western Union office in Gatlinburg. And then Pauline, her and her husband ran Tommy's Restaurant, if y'all can remember. Any old timers remember Tommy's Restaurant? They had restaurants there in the 60s and 70s. So that was their claim to fame. Well, Fred had a son named Henry. Henry had a son named Dennis. And the Parton Deli, if you know the Parton Deli in the lower part of the Parkway in Gatlinburg, it's still open today, 50 years. They started it when Dennis graduated from high school in 1974. I would tell you an interesting story, but I better not. About using the Parton name and not supposed to use it, although they were there before, you know. Anyway, that concludes my talk and my slideshow. I hope you enjoyed it. And just as a side note, Frank Hart's, raise your hand here, brother. Frank's going to have a talk tomorrow. Folks, I would highly encourage you to visit his talk at 4:30, correct? Correct. And he's got a booth. If you go out to the right and go down to the right, he's got a table. I'll hang out there a little bit, have any books if you want to look at them. Frank has done a lot of research up here for several years on finding the occupied and unoccupied sites all throughout the communities of the Smoky Mountains. He's been doing this for years, folks. And it is quite a work. So he's going to talk about that tomorrow. And it's wonderful. I'm going to tell you that it's going to be wonderful. So attend that if you've got time. Okay? Thank you very much. I'll be up here for tomorrow.